Well, hi everybody and welcome back. You know who I am, you know who she is, but just in case you don't know, this is...
I'm Carol.
And I'm Andy. And we're going to have what I hope to be is a very interesting discussion today.
And I have no idea what we're discussing.
And what we are going to be discussing, we are in the middle of December, which means the year of 2020 is going to be over very shortly. I was going to ask you how you feel about that. You feel pretty good about it. So the question is that we're going to be exploring together, and I want you to think about this as we go through it. For the Jewish people, how was 2020?
Not good.
And
for the Jewish people?
For the Jewish people.
I don't know. Why would it be any different for the Jewish people than it was for anybody else?
Well, for a lot of reasons. Political, Israel, practice of religion,
in that respect,
anti-Semitism.
It was a step in progress.
B'nai mitzvahs, weddings, funerals, shivas. Not to say that we had too many funerals. I'm not going to go there in terms of COVID-19. The Jewish contribution to the world, and a whole lots of other topics that when you first think about this subject, a lot of it doesn't come to mind. So we're going to explore it. So let me basically start off with the great news. And the question I want to ask after I present this great news, and you might be surprised, what great news could there possibly be for Judaism? One of the things I want to talk about is, should Judaism spread the word about what I am about to reveal to you? Well, we all know that today is Monday, and we all know that several days ago, they went ahead and they approved the COVID-19 vaccination. That is, in fact, pretty... Right, but that's pretty good news.
That's very good news.
Yeah, and some people would say without the Jews, that wouldn't have happened.
And the reason they would say that?
Because very, very interesting. As we are going to find out, the CEO of Pfizer is the one that did that?
Yes, that's the one that was approved first.
Yep, he is Jewish. The scientist that's responsible for the pioneering breakthrough that allowed for the development of something called mRNA, which is the major component of these vaccines, is actually a Jewish University of Pennsylvania professor whose name was Drew Weissman, I should say, and he used to work for Dr. Fauci at the National Institute of Health.
Oh, really?
Yep, and guess what? It doesn't stop there, because if we take a look at the person who was in charge of Moderna, which is the other one?
Yes.
He is also a Jewish individual. So you have Moderna, you have Pfizer, and you have a Jewish person who's right in there. And there were lots of other Jewish scientists that were in fact part of this whole thing in terms of the development of the vaccine. So here's my question, and that is as follows. Should we, in fact, as Jews, run around and say, aha, the Jews were responsible? And by the way, there's one more I need to add. A fellow by the name of Michael Dolstein was the head scientist at Pfizer. So not only is the CEO the head, but also the head scientist. So I think it's fair to suggest that without the Jews, we wouldn't be where we are. So is this good news for the Jews, or should we keep it quiet? Will that provoke anti-Semitism, or will that provoke gratitude? And I think that's a very important question for these days.
It's a very important question, and it's sort of like on the fence. I mean, everybody's been waiting for this miracle to end COVID. So I personally think it will be a good thing. Look who helped the cause. Look who solved the problem. I think it would be a very good thing.
Yep, and not only that, but by the way, Michael Dolstein got his education at the Weizmann Institute, which is a very well-renowned place in Tel Aviv. So, there's another school of thought that says, well, we really shouldn't go out there and say that, because what will happen, as happened in the times of the plague back in the 1300s...
Are you saying that if something went wrong, then they would blame them anyway, even though it was a good thing if something went wrong?
Well, not only if something went wrong, even if everything went right, guess who is profiting?
The Jews.
And what lead does that bring people to? That people will say, incorrectly of course, that the Jews set this whole thing up so that who can benefit profits from it?
The Jews.
The Jews. Would this be the first time in world history that this would happen?
No.
No. So I go to question number 1. Is that good for the Jews or bad for the Jews? And is this something to celebrate as Jews?
You're making me think. I mean, it's like cause and effect. You're making me think. After you said the second part, I don't know. I think the fact that we have a cure makes no difference. Than it's great to internalize and say, okay, our people had a place in this. But the fact that the world now has a vaccine, so I don't know that should matter. That should matter.
I think you came up with the correct answer.
Oh, I did.
And that is, in my opinion, doesn't mean I'm right, and that is to internalize it. I see absolutely no problem of Jew going over to Jew and saying, guess what we did? Guess what we did in record time? Guess what we did by not even coming together in terms of Jews coming together and collaborating and saying collectively, hey, let's make a vaccine. It was a Jewish seichel that was completely separate from all of this, and they did not operate together, and they were able to make this happen. So I think for the Jews in 2020, that in fact was a good thing. Let me go on to something else that I think was a really good thing for the Jews in 2020. And again, I'm not going to talk politics. I'm not going to talk about cause and effect, who made it possible, who didn't make it possible. However, there were 4 peace treaties. Actually, 3 and 1 coming up. No, 4. I'm right. 4 peace treaties and 1 solid relationship being built with Arab countries during 2020.
Which had never happened before.
Never happened before. And some people are even beginning to say that the last one in Morocco was in fact a Hanukkah miracle because it was announced right before Hanukkah. So I think that's good news. Now, some people might argue, and which is fine, and say, you know what, Morocco never fired a shot at Israel. We didn't fire a shot there. Sudan never fired a shot at Israel. We didn't fire a shot there. And Saudi Arabia and, the United Arab Emirates and the other countries that were involved in the peace treaty. So there's always 2 ways to look at something. But the fact of the matter is, there is signed peace treaties. The fact of the matter is, it does help Israel grow economically. The fact of the matter is, it does help us Jews have a wonderful, wonderful idea of what?
And it makes cohesiveness, and it makes the other Arab countries maybe get them thinking to join.
Yes. Yes, and again, I'm not about to say one president should get credit, they shouldn't. I'm not going to get involved in the politics of that. But when you look at that, you can say to yourself, oh boy, there was a very good positive aspect as a result of 2020. Now, here's something else that we probably had never thought about. In the world of spirituality, people worshiping, people becoming back to religion, people coming back to Jewish education. As a result of 2020, was this a good year or a bad year?
Well, it was a good year because probably more people got on Zoom and more people got online classes because they were stuck at home, they wanted to learn something, and maybe they needed the spirituality to get them through. So,
again, two sides to every coin. What has been occurring, and she's right, what has been occurring, and there's data to support this, that more and more Jews have in fact gone to Zoom to see services for Shabbat and Friday night than normally, so to speak. Now, with that being said, a lot of observant Jews did not go on Zoom, whether they were conservative or Orthodox. So in essence, you might say, all right, maybe there was a balance. But those that did not go on Zoom because they felt that that was not the right thing for the Jewish religion, they didn't drop their spirituality, they just davened at home. They just prayed at home or in wherever they were because they felt it was not right to use electricity. Even though the conservative rabbinates said it was okay, there was obviously some questions about the orthodoxy, and everybody certainly has their own choice. And there's a little bit of proof in that, which is absolutely amazing, that there was a shift in 2020 to something called DIY Judaism.
Do it yourself?
Do it yourself.
Do it yourself Judaism. I love do it yourself projects, but do-it-yourself Judaism, meaning what?
Meaning what? So here's something you probably didn't realize or recognize. There are a lot of websites that actually sell Jewish artifacts for religious purposes, such as a shofar and such as a sukkah. Wonderful. One of the big ones is called Judaica.com. And what Judaica.com found out was something very interesting. During the New Year's, when obviously most people did not go to a shul, they ran out of shofars.
Wow. People bought them and used them at home?
People bought them and used them at home, which means what? Yeah, they might have zoomed in, I got that. But they also wanted to do something on their own. So there were more shofar blowers today in at least the United States. I don't know about the rest of the world. At least in the United States than there have been at any other time. Now you might say to yourself, that's an abnormality. I can understand that. Well, guess what else they ran out of?
Tefillin? They ran out of...
This will really surprise you.
I guess so. What is it?
This will really drive the point home.
What? They ran out of mezuzahs.
Nope.
No, they ran out of Shabbat kit.
Nope.
They ran out of...
I'll give you one more clue. They ran out of something that'll really bring the point home outside of the house. Sukkot.
Oh, you mean...
The sukkah.
The sukkah. Okay.
Yeah. And what they discovered was, again, Jewish people would normally, those that observe, would go to the synagogue for Sukkah or go to somebody else's. Well, they couldn't do that. So they basically had a choice. Abandon the whole holiday and forget about it, or start building your own Sukkah, which, by the way, that is something, according to the Torah, that you're supposed to do right after what holiday is finished? Yom Kippur.
Yom Kippur.
And they did not want to be released from their obligation to go to a sukkah, so therefore they went to Judaica.com and other websites, and they all sold out.
Wow, that's incredible.
It is. So from that perspective, that's good. Now, there's a lot more information that's beginning to come in, and that is, there are synagogues in New York, like Park Avenue Central Synagogue, which is Reform, and the Weiss Synagogue, where Rabbi Weiss is.
92nd Y?
Well, that's something else. And synagogues in Los Angeles, and as I mentioned earlier, on Shabbat, they get at least 1,000 viewers on Shabbat on Zoom for the services.
Wow.
Which in itself is remarkable. And this is a Saturday morning. This is not only on a Friday night. And what they found was the more charismatic a rabbi is, the more charismatic a cantor is.
Well, that makes sense. You know, you're interested. If someone engages you, you're more apt to tune in.
You're more apt to tune in, and that's exactly what they did. So from that perspective, I think 2020 has been a good year for Judaism. Now, I'm going to talk about the opposite side in just a few moments, but I wanted to start off with some of the really good outlook
and you
that
know
this
what?
occurred.
That's interesting because when you say 2020, you automatically think of everything negative. No one would ever say 2020. Let's just get rid of it.
Right.
Right.
And here's a couple of other things that happened which were really positive. And let's go for a moment to the Pesach Seder. Okay. Pesach Seder, we traditionally go to somebody's house, we have some great food, we do all of that. And again, Pesach Seder could have been abandoned. But it wasn't, because not that everybody ran to shul because you couldn't do that, but what they're finding is more people were able to participate in a Passover Seder, shorter albeit, on Zoom with their families. And they were able to get together with their families and have a really heartwarming relationship during the story of Exodus. And I think what happened was, as a result of that, people focused more and more on the story of Passover as compared to years past when they were bored.
Well,
they couldn't sit around.
They couldn't. There was not. You couldn't eat on Zoom.
Exactly. Good point.
You couldn't eat.
You couldn't.
Although you could have the service and break and go and eat later. But you're right. They focused because there was nothing to distract them.
Yes. And we had something very, very unique happen just the first night of Hanukkah where I live in a place called Bellagio. Bellagio is a 55-plus community. About, I'd say, 90% of the 1,100 homes are actually owned by Jewish people. That being said, most are secular Jews, and everybody's got a right to participate in their Judaism the way they feel it's appropriate for them. As hopefully you know by now, I'm not judgmental. I have my own way of practicing the religion, as does Carol. And what we did was, in the past, we would have a candle lighting in the clubhouse. And you know what?
Maybe 15 people showed up.
Well, I was going to say 35.
Maybe
35.
Maybe
and
35.
that was it. Nobody cared. So they reached out to me and they said, hey, would you light the candles? Not to say that I'm a celebrity. I'm not. It had nothing to do with me. Okay? But we did that the other night on Zoom. And what occurred was very interesting. 115 Zoom participants were on this first night of Shabbat candle lighting. I'm sorry. Hanukkah candle lighting, which was in itself an amazing thing. And
because they needed the connection. Things were different,
Yes.
and they needed the connection.
And many others who were not there for that actually went to their families on Zoom to have a connection. Because guess what? I have a hunch the holidays meant more this year than they had in the past. And it's very interesting why. Because if you take something away from somebody, what occurs? They begin to
Miss it and want it.
And they want to come back and they want it.
Right.
So the sale of religious artifacts are up. The participation in services are up. The participation in traditions are up. And I'll tell you something else that is really skyrocketing and that has something to do with Judaism.
What is it?
Jewish education.
Yes.
Jewish education. Most Hebrew schools today, from grades 3 and up, are not going into the building. They're doing it by Zoom. And what we're finding is, and I'm a teacher and I talk to other Hebrew school teachers, and as you know, I teach all grades from 3 all the way up to adult, including high school. Third grade, although I don't teach college, interestingly enough. So what the important thing here is our attendance is the highest it has ever been. People are not skipping classes. Now, that's because they don't have other activities that are competing with them. This is true.
They don't have the sport.
They don't have the sports. And the education that they're getting, not only from me as a teacher, but from our fellow teachers, seem to be of higher quality and longer lasting.
Why is that?
Because they're focused more. I believe they're focused more, and they're not fidgety in their chairs, and it's not that they don't want to be there as much as they used to not want to be there when they used to go to Hebrew school in the building.
Everything makes sense, though, because even if they were not involved in sports, when they went to Hebrew school, they came usually either got out of school, ran home, had a snack, and been dropped off. And that's a lot of pressure for them. And this time, they don't. They are being homeschooled, but they're not rushing. They're not in a car. They're not driving somewhere. It's a different scenario the whole way.
Yep, it is. And they're learning more. And I ran an interesting experiment with my high schoolers the other day. Albeit, high schoolers, once they get past bar mitzvah, how many times, unless they're really religious with a family, how many times do they really come back to the synagogue for a religious service?
Not
that many
much.
times. So I asked my high school students, now that the vaccine looks like it's going to be out there, and maybe buildings will open up in 4 to 5 months, I said, when the buildings are declared safe and you have nothing to be concerned about, would you go back to a Shabbat morning religious service within the first 30 days? And I would say 85% of my 40 students said yes, which was a surprising amount because it's very difficult to get a high schooler into religious services, but they said yes. And we recently had a Zoom service for our 6th and 7th graders, and they all showed up and they all participated in the service. And after, when I say participated, they led in the service. Now, we all know that to get a 6th and 7th grader to participate in the service and lead it, most of them will resist it. Here's the interesting thing that happened. They wanted to do it. They studied it. And then when it was over, the teachers, myself and others, said to them, all right, what do you feel? How do you feel? You glad you did it? And it was amazing. What they said was, at first, I was unsure. But you know what? At the end, I'm glad I went through it, and I'm glad I did it. So there's another aspect of Judaism that really came together as a result of 2020. Now, the question becomes, did we need a pandemic for all this to occur?
Well, that's an interesting question because people always say, why wait till something happens for you to do something? Mm-hmm. Why aren't you normally doing it? Why do you have to wait for this big thing to happen to get you to that point?
Mm-hmm. And you know what that reminds me of? I haven't shared a lot of this.
Yes, I know where you're going with that.
So I haven't. Many of you probably don't know this, but Carol and I survived the tsunami the big one in Thailand. And we were on the beach when the waves came in. I'm not going to go through the whole story. And we survived. Yes, we had water up to our necks, and it's a whole story behind it. But we survived. And when we got home, people wanted me to be on TV and the whole thing, an interview. I didn't want anything to do with it because 250,000 people died, and I didn't want to make my 15 minutes of fame because I survived and 250,000 died. That's not where I was going. But somebody finally asked me, and a reporter asked me about, 2 months after that, and said, as a result of you surviving, what is it about your life that you're going to change? And do you remember how I answered that?
I do, but I want you to tell them. I remember exactly how you answered, but go ahead.
I said absolutely nothing. And the guy was kind of startled. He said, what do you mean? You should be 6 feet under now. What do you mean? You survived a traumatic experience. What does it mean that you're not going to change nothing? I said, I live the type of life that I don't have to wait for a disaster or something bad to make me improve and get to be a better person. That is just built in me. And it took me many years to realize why that was built in me.
Why? Because you went to yeshiva?
Because I went to yeshiva and I'm Jewish, and that's what Judaism teaches. So the fact that we go back to the pandemic, as we move forward post-pandemic, which we're going to be talking about in just a few minutes, what we'll find out is there are a lot of challenges that are facing us. Lots of challenges.
In post-pandemic.
In post-pandemic.
Yes, I agree.
Okay.
Because we've been saying through the whole 2020, I hope it gets back to normal. I can't wait for it to get back to normal. But it might not be the normal that we know. Right. And that's why they call it the new normal.
So let's examine some of those. And obviously you and I cannot have an exchange. I'd love to. But again, Carol's going to act as you because...
I hope I'm doing a good job for you. I'll try to ask the questions you would ask.
So question number one. Let's go to religious services for a moment. Question number one. Most conservative and reform shuls that went on Zoom for their services truncated, which means shortened their services by a considerable amount. Torah reading is different. In my shul, we read the whole Torah during Shabbat. For Zoom services, we read one aliyah, and we didn't even do an aliyah before that. And when the person read the Haftorah, he didn't do the blessings before that, so the thing was real short. We used to do the repetition of the Amidah. We used to do the repetition of the Musaf service. In many conservative shuls and reform shuls, that's not done even pre-pandemic. But we can all admit that services were shorter. Now, question, is that why more people came to Zoom? And when we go live back in shul, should the services go back to their traditional length or stay their shorter length?
I think they should stay the shorter length. I think that's what people got used to, and I think they would appreciate that. And I don't think they should go back. I think they should stay the way they were with Zoom. And I think there should be a alternate or at the same time a streaming or a Zoom service for those that don't want to leave their house but still want to participate.
Realizing, of course, that the only reason that the rabbis permitted Zoom was because of an emergency that the shuls were closed. That. So understand that, now I'm talking from conservative and reform. I don't know if you know this or not, but the conservative rabbinate years back wrote what they call a responsa that said it is perfectly okay to drive to shul as long as that's all you're doing, driving back and forth to shul. They wrote a responsa when the pandemic came out, it's okay to go on Zoom. I'm not quite sure they're going to allow that after the pandemic is over. So with that being said, if you let people go on Zoom, you miss something so crucial to Judaism.
You miss the connection.
You miss the connection. You miss the community. You miss sitting next to each other. You miss telling a joke or talking when someone's reading the Torah. You miss the kiddush. You miss the food. You miss the welcome. You miss the camaraderie. Because remember something. One of the worst things at any age, doesn't matter what age you are, one of the worst things at any age is loneliness. Which is why Zoom has become rather popular, because supposedly it helps reduce loneliness. Yet, what do you think? Should you stick with the tradition? Should you eliminate Zoom? Or how should that be done post-pandemic?
You got me now, but I still think that you should hold Zoom for those people that can't get out. Those people that want to do the service, if for some reason they might be disabled, they cannot get out, they want to do the services. And those that want to go, go.
So what about shul membership? How has that been holding up? Well, interestingly enough, shul membership has remained relatively stable. Now, there has been losses, there's no question about it, and a lot of the losses have been through passing, and right now people are not signing up to be new members. Okay, I got that. We don't know what's going to happen post-pandemic, but right now people are saying, hey, if I'm not going to go to shul and the building is not open and I just moved into town, I'm not necessarily going to join because I can always see their services on Zoom. So if you stay on Zoom, why should people pay for a synagogue membership
that's an interesting
if it's
question.
all on Zoom?
Then the people that do pay for membership should get a password to get in, and those that don't should not.
But there goes your whole theory about providing Zoom to people that are that.
But they still, because most synagogues do require a membership. Yeah, they'll let you come in as a visitor, but they do require membership.
Mm-hmm. So what you're suggesting is you have a passcode for all members or a waiver if you happen to be alone and you can't get out of your house.
Because we, as
and you do it that way.
Judaism will say, we want to include you.
Okay.
That way. Yeah.
All right. Well, what now? I'm going to disagree with you.
Okay,
about,
I'm sure you are.
about the length of the service.
Oh,
Here
we go.
I am going to disagree with you
sure
about the
you
length
are.
of the service. Because in my viewpoint, and again, this is me talking, everybody has the right to their own opinion. The more shortcuts a person takes, the more kavanah, praying with feeling, that a person loses. And if the prayers are said with feeling, because you actually know what you're saying, then of course you lose that possibility. There was a study that came out, which you'll be very interested to know, that if a person sings during the week, okay, they have a better chance of extending their life expectancy. Ready for this? If I remember the number right, by 20%. Okay?
That's amazing. I wish I could sing.
No. You can sing. It doesn't mean you can't sing well.
Yes,
Okay?
I know.
And I can prove that. I think many of you might have heard me say that. Everybody can sing. You can sing Happy Birthday.
Yeah, I can.
Okay, so don't tell me you can't sing. You can't sing it well, but you can sing it. She's okay with me saying that, right? Yeah. So that becomes another dilemma. So I think services should go back with singing, with joyfulness, with spirit, and I think the services should remain the same in honor of the fact that we are back. In honor of the fact that the pandemic did not reduce our spirituality or traditions. Let me go on to something else. B'nai mitzvahs. Ooh, those things were cut pretty short. Students today really don't have to do a lot. Should we require B'nai mitzvah students to go ahead and go back to setting more criteria so that they actually do what they were supposed to do before the pandemic?
Isn't each B'nai mitzvah student don't they have different criteria based on their ability? Sometimes, yes, some B'nai mitzvah students are capable of taking on more. I would think so.
Oh, we're going to get into an interesting discussion, which is probably not part of this, but I'll take the bait.
Okay, take the bait.
I think a bar mitzvah student is capable of doing what they want to do. It's not that hard. If they want to learn Hebrew, guess what? They will learn Hebrew. If they want to learn the trope, guess what? They will learn the trope. If they want to learn how to daven shacharit, then they will learn how to daven shacharit. If they want to learn how to daven Musaf, then they will learn how to daven Musaf. This can't business
Okay, so
is
I'm
really
going to take
won't.
it back. So maybe my phrase to their abilities, when you have a point, I was going to say what they want to do.
Yeah.
So I made, so it's not just their abilities, it's what they themselves choose to do. Some people choose to do more, some people choose to do less.
It's something called intent versus ability. Okay? So, I think bar mitzvah should return to normal. Obviously, funerals were really changed as a result of COVID-19, right? Because now many of us, regrettably, if we lost a friend or a relative or a neighbor,
You couldn't go.
couldn't go. And a lot of people no longer sat Shiva in the traditional manner. Some of them went through the Shiva for virtual. So the question comes up, did we lose our willingness to go through the Shiva requirements when a loved one passes? And
We did. We lost it.
yeah, we're losing it says we're never going to get it back. So, post-pandemic, when everything is safe, will we still have the tradition of Shiva? Or will people begin to say, you know what, they didn't have it for the full year, my friends didn't
No,
have
I don't
it.
think so. I think that's completely different because I think when someone loses someone, the community wants to reach out, and that's a way of paying respect. And I don't think that. I think when the pandemic is over, that the shivas will go. We don't want to have a shiva, but what I'm saying is, I think it'll go back to normal. You do not?
Well, no.
You do not think it
I
will
do
go
not
back
think
to
it'll
normal?
go back to normal. Nope, absolutely not.
Wow.
And here's why I say that. Because traditionally, how long should a Shiva period last?
A shiva period traditionally should last 7 days.
Right.
But in most cases, it hasn't. It's
Correct.
2 to 3 days.
Correct. 2 to 3 days. That's it. 2 to 3 days. I did my religious obligation. I'm done. I'm out. Let me get back to. I'm still going to be grieving. Maybe I'll do the Mourner's Kaddish for a while until I decide to drop it, etc., etc.
I don't agree with you.
So
That it's not going to go back. But go ahead.
no.
I don't agree with you.
I'm okay with that. So this gives people an escape clause, so to speak. Well, we didn't do it during the whole year. Everything turned out all right. The grieving party, they finished their grieving. They moved on in life, etc., etc. So I don't know. The other thing is, if they do go back to Shiva, okay, and unveilings, will people take a shortcut and say, I don't want to go out. I want to do it on Zoom. So should Zoom continue for that? Or for funerals? Or should the grieving party see how many people came out to the funeral? And are you doing a disservice? You didn't expect all this, right?
No, I still don't agree. But that's okay.
No. Yeah, but you're starting to
I'm
understand.
just saying that that's one thing that I don't think will go by the wayside. I just don't.
All right. So you think it'll go back to a full flavor?
Or so maybe they'll reduce the time thing. I'll just have 1 day, 2 days.
Okay.
But that happened in the past. That's nothing new.
That's why I'm giving you proof statement that things change and say, hey, we didn't do it. All right, let's go to weddings.
Let's go to what?
To weddings.
The wedding?
And a bris. You see, all that changed. Probably didn't think about it. All that changed. Are people going to make a big deal out of a bris milah again? Are people going to do these extravagant weddings and b'nai mitzvahs? Please.
Well, I think the extravagant weddings might not be because number one, the economy has changed. Number two, maybe people will get married and have a small select group of people and hold a modest reception afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because that's what I think.
Okay, so what you think?
The Brit Miller, usually takes place. I hate to say this, in a hospital. You maybe can have a ceremony later or whatever.
Okay. All right. So you might not even require an official mohel. A urologist
Right.
who might not necessarily be Jewish
Right.
will be able to perform. Will be able to perform the same thing. Interestingly enough. All right. So these are a lot of the traditions and a lot of the things that have impacted Judaism. And let's go back to education, because I actually forgot something. Not only did I cover the children, what about the adults? There's an organization called the American Jewish University. They developed something called B'Yachad, and they did that nationally as a result
they
of
held
what?
some very interesting discussion. I took some of them, and it was amazing.
Yep. And more adults around the world, especially the United States, because they've got nothing else to do, participated. If they have a computer, they know how to use Zoom, or they can get on Facebook, which is very simple. And more and more people participated in adult education. I run an adult education class, and I had a record in my first semester for the number of people that attended. And once again, attendance was really high. I know in my shul, my rabbi does something. He gets 65, 70 people every time he does something. And for myself, I run a Jewish education program there, and my numbers are also pretty high, which has got nothing to do with me. People want to get involved in Jewish education, adults. So then the question comes up again. After this is over, what will happen to adult Jewish education? Will people say, okay, I'm done, I'm going back out to the golf course, I'm going back to Netflix, even though we're all watching it anyway, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I don't need my Jewish education anymore, been there, done that, it filled the void in my time, and I'm glad I got it done.
I think the number one thing for people is they want to get back to their previous social commitment. They want to get back to if they were in a mahjong group, if they were in a canasta group, if they were in a book club, and they actually got together in person, and they met other people for lunch. I think people are going to be hungry for that in the beginning, and maybe they won't be running around as much or fill up their calendars, and maybe squeeze some of those classes in. But I think their first priority is going to be going back to their social commitment.
So adult education is going to be out the window.
I don't think they're going to focus on it as much as they did. Mm-hmm. I think they might squeeze it in. Maybe they'll stay home in 1 or 2 more nights instead of running out to play this or that. That's what I think. What do you think?
Here's what I think the answer is. If the adult education was stimulating people to think, and they now realize that they don't have to get into the same rut of playing mahjong, of playing games.
Yeah, be careful about the rut. People like playing mahjong. People like canasta. And you know what? Mahjong is a stimulating game. You have to think about it, as well as canasta. So it's not a mindless thing.
But remember, they did without it for such a long time.
Well, not necessarily. People got online to play mahjong. People got online to play canasta.
I don't know how many.
A lot.
A lot. All right. I don't have the numbers yet.
A lot.
But here are the numbers that I do have. When you take a look at Jewish community centers who sponsor adult education, they are getting more people to sign in online and to pay for online courses than they did when they were offering them live.
But they might not get them when the pandemic is over.
That's the question that's on the table today.
I don't think they will.
Will people go back to the way they were, or did they say, you know what? I learned a lot of stuff I never knew before. So let's go to something else about Judaism in 2020. Not a very good subject, by the way. Anti-Semitism. According to the Anti-Defamation League, according to Hillel, which is the college campus national Jewish organization, anti-Semitism is on the rise in colleges and on the rise throughout the country, once again setting record numbers. Now, they're doing a lot of analysis on that, and by the way, I don't want to, again, talk about anything political, but what they're determining is the less democratic a country becomes, the more progressive and the more liberal a country comes, which, by the way, liberalism and progressiveness is led by the Jews in Congress and the senators, and I'm not saying I'm for liberalism and progressiveness or against. I'm just saying that trend is being spearheaded by Jewish people. And the country seems to be following that line of thinking. So, again, not saying what's right, what's wrong, whichever way you want to go in the political spectrum is everybody's own personal choice, just like the observance of religion. However, it is now being thought to be a contributing factor in addition to others.
Why is that?
For anti-Semitism.
Why is that?
That's a very, very good question.
Why is that?
Because they're targeting the Jews for their liberalism, for their progressiveness, and for their success. Because you hear a lot about people going out of business, losing restaurants, having this, having that. But you know what? I don't know about you, but except for the poor that were poor before the pandemic, And in Palm Beach County, I think I heard a number recently that 15% of all Jewish people in Palm Beach County live below the poverty line, which absolutely shocked me. But that is a statistic that's true, but I don't think that went up. I haven't seen anything gone up. So I would say that it would be factually correct that the Jews probably did not suffer monetarily and physically as much as non-Jews did during this time period. Because I don't hear us kvelling, I don't hear us kvetching, I don't hear us cutting back, I don't hear any of that. And I don't see it in the Jewish Journal, I don't see it in the Forward, I don't see it in the Jerusalem Post, I don't see it in the Haaretz, I don't see it in any of the Jewish publications. Now, either it's being censored or it's not happening. And I think as a result of that people might be able to see that, and then all of a sudden anti-Semitism, we Jews become the target for that. We're also the target of that because of the BDS movement, boycotting the goods and services from Israel. Even though there is a understanding that we're getting more peace treaties, but right now in Congress, they elected, if I remember right, 2 or 3 more additional representatives around the country who are for boycotting Israel's goods and services. So the question comes up, post-pandemic, what will happen to anti-Semitism? I don't have an answer to that. I have a prayer. I really do.
Yeah.
I really have a prayer. But I want to try and make another connection here as we talk about post-pandemic. I also ran an experiment with my 7th grade class, was it? Yeah, but yes, it was my 7th grade class. And I said to my 7th grade class, what would happen if just like on Hanukkah, and here's where I'm going to start to make a connection, just like on Hanukkah, if the government came out and forget about the Constitution and all that other stuff, if the government came out and said, you Jews cannot practice your religion, what would you do? And what do you think most of the teens, and I did this for 7th grade and high school, I should say, what do you think most of the teens said?
They probably said, we won't like that. We want to practice our religion.
Yep. Interestingly enough, they said, I want to practice my religion. I will move, some said to Israel, and these are people that normally don't go to shul, by the way. I would move to Israel, I would go to Canada, whatever opportunities there are there, English speaking, of course. I would protest, I would write my congressperson. I wouldn't want this to happen to my religion. And here's what I think is happening. And here's the connection with Hanukkah. You know, during Hanukkah time period, the Jews, of course, were locked out of the temple. Now, we reviewed the history of that because the Hellenists, who were Jewish people, actually kicked out the religious, and therefore the Greeks came in, and then the religious came back and overtook it. But once they overtook it, Judaism came back. Didn't last more than 150 years, but the traditional of Judaism with the sacrifices, which I'm not professing, the sacrifices came back. And I have a hunch that when Judaism is taken away from us, as it was during the pandemic, and if institutions, both educational and synagogues, bring the people back and show them something really spiritual, really educational during the first 30 to 60 days after everything opens up, just like in Hanukkah, when they shut us out of the synagogue, the pandemic shut us out of the synagogue, and the religious institutions and Jewish community centers, and I think people are yearning to get back in. I think people are going to be yearning to recover their Jewish identity, and I think a lot of I pray and hope that a lot of the DYA Jews, which we were forced to be during this time period, a lot of the DYA Jews are going to recognize how important it is. DIY, thank you. DIY Jews, I always do that.
Like D-A-Y, yeah. DIY.
And I think a lot of them are going to be coming back. And one thing I forgot to mention, Minyan on Zoom is up attendance, as is Havdalah services for those that do Havdalah services. So, as we recap, Carol, we started off by saying the Jews, was it a good year for the Jews in 2020? Now that we've put some facts on the table, what do you think?
It was a good year. I mean, you have to think about it. I mean, like I said, initially you say, no, 2020 was a bad year. But if you know all these facts and you put them together, with the exception of the anti-Semitism, then it was a good year.
Yeah, and that reminds me.
Although I still don't know if I would like to think that you are correct, that they're going to come back when everything opens up, and I hope that they do. I'm not sure that they will, because people, if parents have jobs, people will get back to their old routine and be running around and dropping. I'm not sure.
Don't know. Really don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know.
Right.
So someone once asked me, and I'll share my answer with you. Where do you see Judaism, and I actually wrote an article about this, where do you see Judaism in the next 25, 30 years? Well, I'm going to change that. Someone asked me, or I'll ask, where do you see Judaism in the next year? And here's my answer. Judaism will be in the next year wherever you want it to be. We can't leave it up to other people. It's us. It's us. Where do we want it to be? If we want traditional longer services with spirituality, with feeling, if we want to continue Jewish education, if we want to continue the tradition of shivas, if we want to continue the tradition of weddings and funerals and
B'nai
mitzvahs and all of that, there's only one people that can do it, and that's us. And just like the Maccabees rallied to bring back religion into the Jewish life because it was taken away from them, we too can be the Maccabees of the year 2021. We too can bring it all together. Because remember, it was we, us Jews, that had the vaccine, which means it's us Jews too that has the vaccine, the remedy, the cure to build up a beautiful Jewish religion where people get together, people honor God, people honor the culture, people honor the ethnicity of Judaism, people honor the heritage, and people honor the tradition, and most important of all, people honor each other.
Very well said.
My name is Andy Greenberg.
And I'm Carol.
And we truly hope you enjoyed this exploration and this discussion. And happy Hanukkah, everybody, and happy 2021. And we look forward to seeing you again. Bye-bye.